I want to pull on that thread a little bit, like about fame, because fame sunk its teeth into me when I was a kid. I literally, I think I've talked about this. Like when I remember being in like 3rd or 4th grade, writing "Brent is famous" everywhere. And in hindsight now, I'm like, oh man, what was going on with me at that time? And I now realize it was a lot of shame that I didn't have language for, and loneliness because of the shame. Like I was here, but I wasn't here. And I'm noodling with this theory now, because fame is just a thing, you know? But I'm noodling with this theory, like you said, it should only be like a consequence or an after result of what you're actually about. And even then, it's a treacherous path.
Yeah.
So be careful. But I'm noodling around this, like, why do you think people want to be famous? Like, I have a theory about why I wanted to be famous. And like, you always hear these stories. For me, it was always the show Behind the Music that just fed into my, like, oh, they did it, I can do it. And that would give me everything I want, I thought. But you always hear these stories about like an artist that grew up, I'm thinking like Dolly Parton for some reason, like grew up really poor or maybe kind of in a broken home. And I don't know why I'm thinking of Dolly Parton. Oh yeah, it's because you said like when they're on stage, they're like playing a persona almost, like an image. But then when they're off stage, like they can step and make the transition into who they are truly. And in that moment, I'm like, I wonder what Dolly Parton really looks like, because those are all wigs, you know. But anyway,
I didn't know that, but yeah.
Okay. There's a documentary I watched about her. Yeah, and she seems like a really authentic person too. So she's channeling the authentic anyway. But maybe she's a bad example for this. But why do you think people chase fame? Because I'm working on this theory now that people who want fame, like that's what they're after, there's something very dysfunctional happening within them. Like, but I could be wrong.
Yeah.
But maybe people that just want to achieve greatness or like optimize their potential and then perhaps naturally find fame. Maybe that's like not dysfunctional. Maybe that's healthy. What do you think? Like, why do people seek fame? Because we're a podcast for dreamers, and fame is something that's been a part of my story and yours, as far as like chasing it in certain ways. I don't know about if you've ever wanted to be famous, Jake.
Not really. I mean, I think similarly, like as a kid, I think most kids want to be famous because of the ignorance of it's equated to greatness. But as you get the context of adulthood, you're like, I don't want that. And
then all the way back to like the stories of like Agamemnon or whatever his name is, you know, like all these guys that want to, or Achilles, that want to have their name told throughout time, you know, like that's their whole purpose, is to die in like this amazing glory so that their name remains. And
Achilles was offered the life he wanted if he were willing to not die in battle and become famous, and he chose to become famous. And that's the story of it. Was the story of the Iliad was rage, and it was that sort of just insanity, right? He was offered everything he wanted or the chance to become famous, and he chose that. And he died because of it.
He was at the same fork in the road as you, and you went a different way. Yeah, that's why your heels are still intact. So, just a little. So, what do you think, man? Like, what does that bring up in you for someone who works with a lot of people who have achieved fame, and probably even more people that are after that thing? What do you think?
I think it can be a lot of it can be different things. I do think this idea of like a legitimizing of oneself, like this will then finally do away with the imposter syndrome that I live with my whole entire life, you know? So I think that's one of the ways and reasons why. So people won't say, I'm here to be famous, but you can tell as they talk, they're trying to legitimize this career is going to answer the question that their dad raised in their mind or a teacher did, you know, or that just came to them. So I think that's one way. So again, it's very rare that someone comes in my office and says, I want to do this because I want to be famous. They understand, like, right on the point, the nose of that. It's just like, that's ridiculous. Nobody says that. But then once they start talking, or once any one of us starts talking, then you really can reveals like, well, that's really what you're talking about. So to me, it's like, legitimization of oneself, you know, that would be a reason why. I think also it's a power move. Like if you grab something resembling fame, you kind of get the steering wheel of the whole zeitgeist and collective consciousness, and you can really drive the narrative, you know? And so you don't feel like you're as much, you know, being drug around by all the other idiots, you know? Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of power in that. And I do think that that's a big, it's interesting talking to artists, like origin stories. The reason why a lot of times people, this is my opinion, anecdotally, that people who have been really successful and achieved a lot of fame and recognition, that the reason why their story often starts in like just abject poverty or intense struggle and trauma, that produces that fire, that energy, that combustion that you have to go so contrary to what is human to get to that space. Yeah. Like you think, well, how does a person do that? Because it really is a hard way to live. And it's exacting every day. And so people look at people who are famous or achieving fame, like they just have it so easy. And nothing could be further from the truth. They're actually doing something incredibly difficult. And I mean, that's, wow. I mean, I can't believe you work that hard and do all that and forsake all these other things. Kind of like you were saying, we were talking about, they've paid the tolls. Like they're just flying through tolls and paying all those. So, and the reason why they can do that is oftentimes you find in their origin story, like this huge combustion chamber of trauma and hurt and dislocation and pain that's just fueling that. So a lot of times for me, like I see it as, you know, this sort of, again, reaffirmation, reclamation, identity building, or kind of a power grab, like an ability to control the outcome of my life, you know, and you know, those are two things I think that people are driving toward. And again, it's interesting that you asked Jake if he ever wanted to be famous, and he just said no. And I guess what I would say is it is kind of we're in Nashville, Franklin. Fame is actually a kind of a relevant topic in this area. But I mean, you know, I've been doing this work for, you know, the better part of almost 30 years. And there are ways, those two things I just was talking about, that's what I'm saying. Like, if you asked Jake if he struggled with those two things, you said, did you ever want to be famous? He said, no. But if you asked Jake, well, you've struggled with trying to make a case for yourself about your life, or you've wanted control to eliminate the chaos, he would have said yes. Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah.
So it's kind of sometimes you have to learn this in the counseling office. Like if you walk through the front door and say, now we're going to talk about how fame is bad, it kind of blows the whole thing, you know? This discussion just kind of grinds to a halt. But if you drop in at a deeper level and get into the nuances of what really makes a person tick, then you're actually having a more productive conversation.
Different fruit, same root kind of thing.
Yeah.
You know, it's like,
exactly.
That's good.
Different I just came up with that, right? Same or different mechanism, but the same problem. Yeah. Essentially.
Yeah. And that's where, to me, like people say they've known me from my past life, like more in pastoral work, and they think this is like so different. And in my mind, I'm just like, no, it's not. I will tell them, it's like, it's really actually not that different. Like, and ultimately, you know, if a really famous artist walks in my office and sits down and talks, and then just someone who's just, I mean, no one in terms of the world and the big stage walks in, you're having very similar conversations. People are people.
Yeah.
And that's just, you know, so true. I mean, it's just absolutely true that you could get a group of guys in here, no matter what they did, and you would eventually find the archetypes and the stories, and
yeah,
and that's actually that's not just a interesting kind of recognition. That's actually really powerful, because then you're actually known. Like that's where you're like, my brothers know me. These people, you feel that sense of like we're all on this island waiting for news from across the sea. And I was like, wow, that's really powerful recognition.